Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Week 8 Sports Economics Reflection discussion. For this week, we're only going to be discussing about the content for one class that happened on Wednesday because the course for Monday was canceled. However, Professor Rizzo, I think, was able to synthesize a lot of the information and get it all into that one class period. But in any event, without further ado, I wanted to get right into it and discuss about, or add something to a point that Professor Rizzo made about Jackie Robinson, of course, the famous baseball player who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball, or the MLB. Now, Rizzo was trying to make the case that Robinson might very well be the greatest, like, pure athlete of all time, or at least not necessarily of all time, but in the four major North American professional sports leagues. And that Robinson had to be such a prolific athlete in order to help break the color barrier. And Branch Rickey, who was the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers at the time, he had to look out for an athlete like Robinson, or else the of course opportunity to break that color barrier might not have presented itself, or at the very least not worked out as well as it did. Not to say that there weren't bumps in the road, because of course there certainly were. But point being, Robinson was ultimately, able to be signed to the Brooklyn Dodgers and had a great MLB career. Now, I really liked it that he brought up that point about Robinson and was able to tie it to a lot of class material, because my group and I had actually done our The Greatest project, where we watch a movie or book, or we decided to watch a film, and we watched 42, well, which of course stars Chadwick Boseman as Jackie Robinson, portraying him sort of his career going from the minor leagues into the Brooklyn Dodgers. I did not realize that when Robinson was at the University of California at Los Angeles, or UCLA, that he had lettered in four different sports. I didn't realize that he was so good outside of baseball. And so, this is something I think that added to the context of the film, because it showed how, I guess, tying it back to an earlier homework assignment we did, how much grit Robinson had in order to balance his time and other priorities in order to become so successful at these different sports. Now, translating it to the Brooklyn Dodgers, and really not just for Robinson, but for any other athlete, it's important to consider, and of course we went over this in the class, but it's important to consider the marginal revenue product of labor, or MRPL, which is sometimes shortened to MPL, because this helps determine it plays a good part in determining what one's wage will be, or at least should be, when trying to calculate how much extra revenue a given employee would bring to a club, organization, business, whatever have you, that otherwise wouldn't come if that employee wasn't there. Which is why, in the case of contemporary professional athletes, not necessarily the types like Robinson, because back when he played, the way in which the league was structured was much different, and the unions weren't as strong as they are today, or sports leagues unions aren't as strong. But there are cases where even if you're getting paid 40 or $45 million, like maybe Patrick Mahomes is of the Chiefs, and soon to be Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys, even if you're getting paid, that much, there's the argument to be made that these players are actually undervalued relative to the amount of extra money that they bring in to the organization. However, of course, this isn't always the case, because not everybody is a star player or is of the caliber of the two different quarterbacks that I just mentioned, certainly not of the caliber of Jackie Robinson. And so what we're going to see normally, and not just for sports, but Rizzo related this to academics and other life too, is that there are going to be different ebbs and flows to the value that an employee contributes to the employer, and there will be times where one is underpaid or overpaid based on how much work that person was able to produce relative to the revenue that the employer is bringing in. So that to me was a very it was a very interesting point because in the movie 42, and I don't want to go too tangential here, but they didn't really go into a lot of detail regarding the specifics of Robinson's contract, nor did they discuss anything about I guess what would be considered fringe benefits, or like different things that Robinson would get either from the Brooklyn Dodgers or organizations that helped support the Brooklyn Dodgers because he was on the team. Uh, right, like I'm not an expert on this obviously, but I assume they didn't really have health insurance for athletes back then, and they're. It, what I'm trying to say is that trying to think about this in the backdrop of discriminatory preferences and racial discrimination in sports is something I think very tricky, and something that I would love to research more about, right? Because if Robinson was able, assuming Robinson was able to get, all the same fringe benefits of being a Brooklyn Dodger as his white teammates, and assuming that he was able to add, so much to the overall revenue of an organization and the status of the Brooklyn Dodgers, then one would think naturally that Robinson would have been able to, enjoy, I guess, a lot of different aspects of life to being a Brooklyn Dodger that maybe, a a member or a backup pitcher, whatever the case may be, would not be contributing to the team as much. Now, one other thing to consider is that the power of the sports unions, and I think I mentioned this earlier, has grown significantly over the past few decades or so. People like Jackie Robinson don't need to work alternative jobs anymore in order to keep their lives afloat. It's all, athletes are multimillionaires nowadays, and they don't need to work extra jobs. They can focus 100% on the craft for their sport, which is very, very bizarre to me because, from my understanding, the power of unions has gone down in this country rather significantly since the 1950s. So I don't really know what it is about sports that makes those unions so powerful when you compare it to, like, for example, the United Auto Workers, or like, I don't know what's another union, any blue collar sort of, maybe not even blue collar, just any other union in the private sector that is supposed to act on behalf of a large segment of workers. But yeah, anyways, I think I'm done for today. I will wrap it up here, and I will see y'all again next week.